the Mogwai, right? Like,
Yes, very much like that.
Right. So, that's the stereotype. And I will tell you that just like every other stereotype, some of those people exist. There are developers who do like to sit at their desk and code all day. And your team needs some of those. They are oftentimes some of the, have some of the higher aptitudes of some of the very technological challenges you're going to face on a project. And the ability for someone to sit down and put on their headphones and focus on a thing without looking up can be beneficial. There's a thing in development and other parts of life called flow, where you just get into something and you get rolling on it. And when you get interrupted when you're in a flow, like the context switch kills your productivity. And so, like, I think that's a thing for every developer to some degree, the flow aspect of it. But sitting there with your headphones on in the dark, like I said, there are some people that want to do that. There are others that should be doing other things and pull their head up and look around. And I try and provide those that want that opportunity so they can see what's going on.
These days, a lot of people are moved into management positions that don't have management experience.
Of course.
You're the best developer we have, so guess what? You're in charge of the development team. Or
Right.
generation or two ago, I mean, you had to have management schooling or things
Right.
like that to get those positions. But these days, it's not like that. So in your challenges in moving from that person sitting in the dark with the headphones on to a management position, what are some of the things that you had to learn and some of the things maybe even you had to unlearn in order to get successful and move into a position like you are now?
I think one of the big challenges I faced was probably just learning how to deal with unpredictability. When you're dealing with a keyboard and a monitor, there's a very predictable outcome. The computer only does what you tell it to do, unless
doesn't
you're
feel
making
like that sometimes. It doesn't.
I know, unless you're making some incredible AI that I don't know about yet.
Right, exactly. Skynet.
Right. But then you switch over to effectively managing people, and it's a very unpredictable environment. And I think there's something to be said for learning how to handle that. And I've had people ask me about that before, and I frequently compare it to going to the emergency room with like a cut on your hand. Like, you never hear the doctor go, wow, I have never sewed up anything that large before. Let me go get someone else.
Right.
And that's, you just have to have that calmness, that empathy, and that ability to deal with what's unpredictable. And that was definitely something that took some time for me to learn.
You have to embrace the chaos,
right?
A bit, right? People I talk to nowadays are getting better at that. I mean, there's a lot of educational resources out there, but I always go back to just like start with reading Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Start there. It's a quick read. Sure, there's maybe a few concepts that are out of date, but the core is there, and it deals a lot with empathy, and more importantly is self-awareness, which I find is probably the least popular skill that I find in management these days.
One thing I would add to that is if you're interested in getting into that and you're a developer, find a mentor, just like you would for a piece of code. Find yourself more than one mentor, frankly. Talk to people that are already doing it or that have an interest in it, and they will be able to suggest books, offer advice, and they will be a shoulder to lean on when you're in one of those spots where you're not sure what to do, frankly.
It's always good to ask. Those people have been through what you're about to go through and can provide a lot of advice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, no matter how difficult you think a situation might be, it's probably not the first time it's happened on the planet.
Yeah, it's probably, nothing is new, right?
Right.
When you're doing that mentorship, what's the typical, like you mentioned, like weekly meetings and things, but what's the typical cadence for you that you feel is appropriate for checking in with people? Like how do you check in with folks? Like, what's the best way to do it? Because, like you said, you mentioned flow, and you don't want to interrupt people, but you got to talk to them, right?
So I think there has to be a defined cadence. Number one, you have to say we're committing to doing this so that people know you're serious about it and you're creating that culture. At the same time, you want to be flexible about when. So what I like to do is try and schedule some time and say, hey, we're looking at this time, but I also want to be flexible to your schedule. We're gonna get it done this week, so let me know when is good for you, and I try and work it in when possible during that time, because flexibility is worth a lot, frankly.
Sometimes people would prefer to just send an email or send a Slack or something saying like, hey, I don't know what's going on with this thing. But the importance for me is that face-to-face communication that you providing with these developers. I think that's super important because body language, eye contact, all that stuff communicates as much as your words do.
Absolutely. If you're out there and you're managing a team of developers, make sure you're taking the time to sit down with them and talk. They all have a lot to tell you and a lot of thoughts, and it's just giving them the opportunity to share those with you.
Let's talk about the negative side of the development team. Let's say you've got somebody who is underperforming, right? Obviously, it should go out without saying that if they're underperforming, you need to have a talk with them, right?
Absolutely.
But let's say that behavior continues. Like, what have you seen successful in either pulling people out of those nosedives or at least helping them get out as quickly as they probably should?
I really think it's directness in communication. A lot of times, people at first won't really even realize that they may be in a nosedive. They think they're doing what you've asked for. And so you want to be very clear with them about what you want, and sit down, have a conversation, and say, these are my expectations. And if I wasn't clear about it before, I want to be clear now. So is that clear to you? And just talk with them and make sure that they do truly have an understanding of what your expectations are and how they're performing to those.
Being deliberate in that communication is important.
If the talking is not working, sometimes people have other ways that they take in information better. So maybe it's time to put it on paper, or maybe it's time to find a different delivery mechanism where it really resonates more with them.
In my early years of managing people, I would have no problem talking with them and communicating with them. But like you said, not everybody's the same, right?
Right.
Some people, when you slide a piece of paper over and say, sign this, this is your performance plan that we're going to be working on, that makes an impact. That is going to show them that this is a serious case and it needs to be addressed.
Right. I mean, especially developers, like how infrequently they see paper, it's like a very impactful moment.
Right. They're like, what is this thing? Right. I don't understand. Where did it come from? Let's talk about developers and growth a bit. So a lot of times developers get excited about maybe a certain framework or a platform or CMS or something, and they really gravitate towards that one thing. And maybe they start using, it's just like if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I'm really good at WordPress, so I'm going to put WordPress in everything. How have you seen success kind of working with developers to not always look at the solution they're the most comfortable with is the solution?
I think there has to be, again, going back to culture, this idea that you are obsessed with helping clients. And so you have to understand their needs and what they are, and then you have to weigh the pros and cons of how good something is going to work. It sounds probably pretty boring, but you can sit down and do a SWOT analysis really fast to see if a WordPress is right for someone, if a Drupal is right for someone, if you want to do something custom with Laravel. It's just a matter of figuring out how you can make the biggest impact for your client with what's available.
So regarding the team, what have you found to be a good size for a team of developers?
On any given project, I think there's a maximum number of developers before you start losing a pretty serious amount of efficiency. There was a book out there called The Mythical Man Month by Brooks, and it talks about the idea that the more people you add to a project doesn't cut the time down, right? It can actually increase time based on the complexity of communication. And I think that's true both on a project and on a team of developers working on multiple projects. My team today, there's a team of 4 of us, and that's been a very efficient size. I can tell you that I've also seen it work at larger scales, but you start running into problems like losing empathy for each other because you don't get to work with each other except for maybe once every 2 years.
Right.
And so Every project that comes in or every customer that comes in with a problem, you have to sit down and reintroduce yourself to that team. And there are some strategies to get around that, maybe by putting some tribes within the teams or specific areas of focus. Sure. But I really feel like having a tight-knit group of probably less than 20 people or so is about maximum efficiency and really people understanding each other and working well together.
Well, and there's so many different types of development out there. I mean, you've got everything from cloud infrastructure to front-end services to mobile applications to all these different things. And so, yeah, like you said, there isn't really a one-stop solution in terms of the development, in terms of the technology they're working on. It's more about, are they communicating? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Right, absolutely. The way people talk, and this goes beyond the development team. When you put together a team to help out a customer, you're probably going to have someone managing that account. You might have a project manager. You might you might have somebody doing creative work. You might have a UX person, a developer. There's a ton of people that can be involved, and the more those people understand how they work together, the better thing I think you're going to produce.
Something I've talked about on the show previously has been about making sure your developers understand why they're doing what they're doing. I've found that to probably be the most important lesson that I've learned in terms of developing software in the past is that if they really understand that why, I get it, it can be a little pricey to have a developer not developing and in a client meeting, but the savings that happen because that developer is making these decisions constantly, minute by minute, as they're building out the software. And if they have that guiding principle, if they know the why this is going to be successful for the client, why the client needs this, they're just going to make better decisions, right?
Knowing the why is important, and knowing the who is important too. If you're working with someone from another company and you hear them talk about why this is important and how important it is, not only for the company, but for their career or them keeping their job, or them impressing their boss. They have fought very, very hard to get these dollars to do this project. And it is up to you and the developers on your team to use those efficiently to deliver the best results you can within the time and budget allowed.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're jumping around just a bit here, but I want to talk about hiring developers and where to find them. Where do you find developers? Do you just stick a thing up on Indeed and you just wait for the resumes to rain down from the heavens? Is that how that works?
Thousands at a time.
Thousands. You just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of these resumes of these top talented people.
Where I go try and find developers first is from my network. I want to hear from people that I know. I'll say, hey, I'm looking for someone to fill this job that I may have opening. It's before I've usually even posted it online. And to say, do you know anyone out there in the field right now that's looking? And usually I'm talking to a peer or a mentor of mine, and they may have a recommendation. And at that point, I generally want to talk to those people because I believe that network that I've built is going to provide the people I'm looking for. Now, that's not always the case. There are other times where it's time to reach out into the world and find someone that isn't recommended or that you need to find. I find it very generic to go out and just drop stuff out on LinkedIn or any of the other job websites like Indeed to try and find someone. I try and be a little more personal about it. So maybe that's at one of the meetups that I might attend, talking about, hey, I work for this place, we're hiring. If you're interested, come talk to me. And it's just an opportunity to be a little bit more personal with it. I feel like some of those written job descriptions can be very off-putting. People self-select out based on what's in them. Oh, I don't have that one skill, and so they don't turn into a thing. But when you're in person and talking, you can say, I'm hoping to hire someone. If anybody here is looking for a job, come talk to me. And it's a way different experience than someone reading through your carefully crafted list of 14 bulleted requirements for them to acquire a job.
Right. Well, but Tony, you mentioned a network and meetups and things. I'm really busy. I don't have time to go and do these things. There's a new season of Game of Thrones and some Netflix that I want to watch, and I've got a family. and all these things. And you're telling me I need to build up and maintain this network, you say?
Yes. You know,